What's going on, guys, and welcome back to F123 for My Team Career Mode Season 1, round number 15, the Sao Paulo Grand Prix, or the Brazilian Grand Prix. Love this track, it's a great track, but before we get into that, we have our first retirement announcement on this game. Nico Hülkenberg is retiring at the end of this season. Not necessarily one of the drivers that I would have expected to be retiring this early, but yeah, that's going to leave a seat open at Haas, so Hülkenberg out of Formula 1 at the end of this season, so only 2 more races for him and a sprint race, but yeah, that's going to be interesting to see who fills in that seat. I'm going to adapt a few more of my durability parts because durability and powertrain has a regulation change going into Season 2. I've already upgraded all the powertrain parts because we actually didn't have that many and still have the quickest car on the grid with the engine, or the best engine on the grid at least. A few more durability upgrades. I might not adapt all of them, but I'll probably have enough credits to adapt all of them by the end of the season, but I might prioritize some other upgrades, but we are at least putting a few on there. And as we look at R&D, things are getting ridiculously close in the top 5. I mean, look, the top 5 teams are pretty much separated by nothing. Ferrari, Red Bull, Mercedes, Aston Martin, and TGL Motorsport, my own team, we're all right there. So this could be our best opportunity at getting a legitimate, not only podium, but race win on pace here, because we are all in that hunt, all 5 of us, and it's actually not that big of a gap back to, I think, Haas, McLaren, and maybe Alpine just behind us. So yeah, things get closer and closer. I'm interested to see what's going to happen in Season 2. I have a feeling that we're going to get bigger gaps for Season 2, but it's been a ridiculously close first season, at least on R&D, so that's pretty crazy. Q1 comes and goes, and pace is looking good. P4 in Q1, and I only did 1 flying lap at the start of the session. Didn't bother to go out again because we do have some fairly worn components on the car, and I was trying to eke out not having to do another grid penalty. We get away with it for this race. I think, though, I've not yet recorded the Las Vegas race for the final race of the season, but I think we're going to have to take at least a grid penalty for one of the components. I might be able to run on fairly worn components, but yeah, basically the ICE, and I think it's I'm not sure if it's the control electronics or the energy store. I think it's the control electronics. Those are quite worn. By the time this race is done, they are rather worn, so it's going to be interesting whether we're going to have to take a grid penalty for Las Vegas. It's P2 in Q2. By the way, Jack Doohan didn't even make it out of Q1, so that was very disappointing. Both McLarens are also out, not making it into Q3, so that's pretty big as well. So yeah, Norris usually able to get it into Q3, but unfortunately he only makes it into Q2 this time around. We get onto our Q3 lap time though. Now I've put a banker on the board for P7, but that was on a used set of tyres. But the fact that we're in P7 ahead of Alonso, Gasly, I can't remember who the other couple of cars were, but yeah, ahead of a few cars that I think it's mainly it's really only Alonso that I kind of wouldn't have expected to be ahead of, you know, on a used set of tyres. But he must have had a bad lap because we're not that quick here. But as you can see on the new set of tyres, we are gaining time, not as much as I thought actually, so maybe that lap time on the used tyres, and I mean tyre wear isn't massive on this track, so maybe it's just the fact that those tyres were actually bedded in pretty well and really didn't have a massive effect on performance. We're only about 0.2 up, just under, or just kind of floating under and over 0.2 of a second, and that is the gain we're gonna make, and in the end that is going to be good enough for P4 on the grid going into the sprint race, because remember this is a sprint weekend, so we've got a sprint race, then the main Grand Prix. Carlos Sainz gets his another pole position. He will be starting on the front row for the sprint race. Then it's George Russell, Verstappen, and myself. Charles Leclerc in P7 on the weekend. He could seal the title, so let's see how this sprint race goes.
Let's run you through the driver grid order for today's exciting sprint. It's Carlos Sainz in pole position, just ahead of George Russell, who starts this event from P2. Moving on to the rest of the grid, we have Verstappen, Davies, Hamilton, Perez, Leclerc, Fernando Alonso, Ocon, Gasly, Norris, Stroll, Bottas, Albon, Magnussen, Hulkenberg, Doohan, Tsunoda, Joe, Oscar Piastri, De Vries, and Logan Sargent. And with preparations almost complete, let's head trackside for today's sprint.
So here we go for the sprint race in Sao Paulo, the Brazilian Grand Prix sprint to 5 red lights. Lights are out and away we go. We're starting on the soft tyre, most people are. There's a couple of medium tyre runners. Verstappen is one of those alongside us. We get up the inside of him into turn 1, he brakes later. We make a little bit of contact with the Dutchman through turn 1, gets him out of shape a little bit. We're also slightly out of shape, but that was a bit of an interesting start there because we got a better launch than Verstappen on the softer compound of tyre. But Verstappen kind of came back at us and somewhat turned into us a little bit in through turn 1. So that wasn't really the greatest start for us, but thankfully no damage for either of us. But we're now slightly under threat from the car behind of, I believe, Lewis Hamilton. Yes, it is. So we're going to try and keep him behind because he is on the soft compound tyres. Sainz and Russell are both on the soft. Verstappen's on the mediums, and there's a few cars further back on the mediums. But yeah, Verstappen going for the different strategy here. Of course, being a sprint race, no pit stops in this one, or no expected pit stops anyway. So it's basically just, do you want to be on the soft compound and hope that they last you the whole race, or do you want to kind of take it a bit more conservative, go on the mediums, be a bit slower at the start, but potentially be better at the end of the race? We went for the softs. That was the preferred strategy to go for. And most people seem to have done that. It's only a few outside the top 10 that have gone on the mediums, but Verstappen's one of the exceptions. As we now head on to lap number 3, and we're now looking, we're all over the back of Verstappen because he's not very quick on those medium compound tyres. We can't quite get him into turn 1, he goes defensive, but then he's quite out of shape through turn 1 there into turn 2. He gets the back end out a little bit, and that is a moment where I think we are going to have to pounce on this because now we have DRS as well. He goes defensive, but we shove our way to the inside, actually a little bit more tyre banging through the next corner there, but we get up ahead of Max Verstappen, and now we're going to try and chase down Russell and Sainz up ahead. And Verstappen is starting to now come under threat from Lewis Hamilton because those medium tyres just are not as good as the soft compound at the start of this race. Hamilton trying to go round the outside. He's got the inside for turn 2. As they head round turn 3, Hamilton still trying to stay there on the outside. And he's just about got his nose there. And with the DRS, he's going to be able to power past Verstappen. Verstappen, though, may fight this. You know what the rivalry between these two is like. Verstappen does try and fight it, and he is just about still ahead. But still, Hamilton is side by side. A great battle, a battle going on between these two here, but Hamilton will eventually get up the inside and ahead of Verstappen up into P4 for him. And now Fernando Alonso is the next one to try and move on Max. He dummies him to the outside, then dives to the inside to do the opposite of what Hamilton did. Can he get this done here? Verstappen really struggling on those medium tyres, and sure enough, Fernando Alonso is passed, and now he's going to have to look at Charles Leclerc behind us. We get a great little camera view here from the back of Alonso's car. Leclerc goes up the inside of Verstappen, and he's passed as well. So poor Max Verstappen here. I say poor Max Verstappen. He's going down, 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 but maybe towards the end of the race, those medium tyres will pay dividends. And we have some serious pace here as we are now going for a move on George Russell for P2. We lost a bit of time at the start battling with Verstappen. Not a whole lot though, but our pace here is really good. We make a little bit of contact with him through turn 2. I wasn't 100% sure if that was really a fair move or not. So we're going to not necessarily let him back pass, but we're going to fight him into the next corner, go side by side with him. We're going to try stay on the outside here, but he's actually got better grip up the inside there, and he stays ahead. I'm not too fussed about that though, because I did feel like, I don't know, I think I give him room and I was entitled to that space, but it was a little bit clunky, so I thought we'll just go side by side with him, and he has got the position back again, but he's lost a considerable amount to Carlos Sainz, who is absolutely flying in this race out front, and he doesn't have DRS, so now we're going to go very aggressive to the inside of turn 1 and get the move done that way. We're actually going to get him before we even get through turn 2. And we may have to look in our mirrors a little bit because of the DRS that he will have into turn 3, 4, into turn 4. But in the end, it doesn't matter. we do start catching Carlos Sainz, but he's still very quick, and we're not going to be able to catch him in the race. He's going to go ahead to win the sprint race, but we are going to come through for P2 in the sprint in Brazil. That is a very good performance. My pace here is really good. I love this track. It's one of my favorite tracks on the calendar, and the car suits it. Yeah, it's just a really good track. Always been good at this one in previous games. George Russell comes home for P3, so it is a podium of sorts for us here, although I don't really count it as a podium. Doohan's unfortunately gone backwards to P18, so that's not good. I was hoping maybe he'd make up a couple of positions, but now we've just got the main Grand Prix to go, so let's see what is in store for us.
Welcome along then to where heroes and history are made. It's where the 2008 title was decided in the very final corner. And just 1 year later, Jenson Button stormed through from 14th on the grid to claim his one and only Drivers' Championship. It's time then for the Sao Paulo Grand Prix. We're racing today then at Interlagos, a historic 2.7-mile circuit and one of the few anti-clockwise tracks on the calendar. 15 corners in total, 9 to the left and 6 to the right, with a technical middle section opening up to a flat-out Sector 3. That gives us our best passing opportunity down into Turn 1. Let's run you through the driver grid order for today's exciting race. Davies lines up on pole position, and Lewis Hamilton completes the front row. Looking down the rest of the grid, we have Fernando Alonso, Leclerc, Perez, Gasly, Norris, Sainz, Stroll, Albon, Russell, Oscar Piastri, Bottas, Magnussen, Doohan, Tsunoda, Zhou, Ocon, Sargent, De Vries, Hulkenberg, and Max Verstappen completes the grid. With preparations almost complete, let's head down to the track. Anthony Davidson is here once again for today's Grand Prix.
The key now will be to keep in the right mindset. We've seen time and again that things go wrong if you just try and do the minimum. Not necessarily because of the pressure, but because it's different to your usual approach. They'll need to avoid that and stay focused today.
Alright, so here we go for the main Grand Prix, for the Brazilian Grand Prix, and we are on pole position because Sainz has got a grid penalty, so we are starting from the front of the grid here in Brazil. Lights are out and we get a pretty good start. Hamilton on the inside, he gets a decent start too, but we just about managed to stay ahead of him through turn 1, so now we lead the Brazilian Grand Prix. This is very exciting news here as we head down the straight here. Having to go quite defensive though because Hamilton has got a lot of pace and the AI always drain their battery on the first lap of a race. We are using a decent amount of battery too though to try and stay ahead of Hamilton, but he is right up the back of us here. We've also got Alonso in P3, also on the soft compound tyres. Leclerc then is the next car back, and Perez. Those are both on the medium compound, so taking a different strategy in this main race here. Leclerc, of course, I mentioned it before, he can win the championship here today. He got outscored by Russell in the sprint, but he still has a very big advantage going into this race. If he can finish ahead of Russell, or even only a couple of positions behind him, he will win the championship here in Brazil. Around one of the final corners here though, and I have a bit of a sideways moment, just a bit of off power oversteer, and Hamilton gets past us, and he will now lead the Brazilian Grand Prix. So not quite the smoothest first lap as I was hoping, and now we're actually having to go defensive against Alonso, who's all over the back of us as well. We very nearly run into the back of Hamilton through turn 1. But we're now going to have to compose ourselves a little bit because we have lost the lead at the end of that first lap. Jack Doohan, my teammate though, had a great start off the grid. He's made up about 3, I think this is going to be 4 positions if you can get past George Russell there in the Mercedes. He's further back actually because of a grid penalty, so that's not good for him. You know, when he's fighting Leclerc for the championship here and needs to finish ahead of him by a considerable margin. So not looking good for Russell at the moment. But yeah, Doohan is making moves in this race. He's gone now ahead of Alexander Albon in the Williams as well. So after a sprint race going backwards a couple of places, he is going forwards. He's made up 4 or 5 positions already in the first couple of laps here in the main race. Lap number 6 on to 7, and we've got DRS from Hamilton up ahead, and he's actually not really going to fight us into turn 1. Stays on the racing line but doesn't position his car to go really defensive. We're side by side through turn 2, but we are going to come out ahead. He must have had a little bit of a moment there because he's fallen now back slightly into the clutches of Fernando Alonso, but we are going to now lead this race once again. I believe this is, this is George Russell going for a move on, I'm guessing that must be Lance Stroll then, because Alonso is up there in P3 with Hamilton. Russell making his way through the order, needs a good finish here ahead of Leclerc to stay in this championship, so he's got to really make some positions up. The rain is coming though. There was rain forecast for the middle of this race, but it was like the tiniest little blip, like it was one little like icon in the strategy screen, so I didn't really and it was only a very light rain, and it was like 50%, so I thought probably not going to be rain. If there is, it's going to be very light. The rain's come on a bit more than I was expecting though. I guess the whole, not perfect accuracy forecast is really kind of rearing its head here. Drivers are coming into the pits for intermediate tyres. Perez is in. Russell's come in as well. He's got to take that gamble. I went a couple of laps longer, but on lap number 12, we are going to come into the pits, and it's the same time that Hamilton and Alonso are coming in as well. So that is good for us to cover those guys off. Being in the lead of the race, it's quite difficult to, decide what to do, because, you're the one leading. If you go too early, you might screw yourself over. You go later, they might get the undercut on you. So pretty lucky there that I decided to come in the same time they did. Sergio Perez though, going early it's actually worked out pretty damn well for him, and now he's alongside Lewis Hamilton, who has lost out because of coming in, with us. It wasn't as bad for us because we had a bit more of a lead, at least over the cars that had pitted a fair way before us. But yeah, Hamilton's dropped a few places now, Perez moving up, and then this is one of the Alpines, this would be Pierre Gasly. He's also going for a move on, that's not also Lewis Hamilton, is it? I think it might be. I'm not 100% sure. I can't see what colour the T-cam and the helmet is there, but Gasly making positions here, showing he's got some pace in that car. I think it might be George Russell actually, I'm not 100% sure. Now we have one of the Ferraris going for a move into turn 1 on one of the Mercedes. It's so difficult, especially in these wet conditions where it's quite dark and gloomy, to see who's who here. I believe that'll be Sainz, because I can see the yellow on the T-cam, so I'm guessing that's probably Sainz on Russell. And then now we have Hamilton on Leclerc, so it's Mercedes v Ferrari for both of them. Hamilton trying to get back ahead of Leclerc because Leclerc got ahead in the pit stop phase, and these two are going to be side by side in the wet here. Great racing in these conditions from these two drivers, but Hamilton manages to get back ahead and up into P2. But you can see the gap that we're pulling now. Now in the dry, we were probably the quickest man on track, although Hamilton did have the fastest lap. And Simons was pretty quick as well, but we were probably the quickest, at least in the top 3 quickest on track. In the wet, we are by far the quickest. We are so much quicker than everybody else, so it's looking good for us here. And the rain is staying around for a lot longer than I expected. Lance Stroll has just gotten himself past my teammate of Jack Doohan. I think that's the move for P10 as well. So Doohan actually managed to get up into a points-paying position after, a great start like we saw, but also after coming in quite early for the intermediates and jumping a bunch of cars. But he has, I believe, just fallen to P11 with that overtake. It's actually kind of boring for us. We're just driving around on our own, but we're in the lead, so I will take it. There are still moves going on, which is good because, like I said, it's not too exciting for me. Sainz trying to now get past one of the Alpines. I believe, once again, that is Pierre Gasly in that Alpine car, but he's going to fight this one really well. But Sainz, he's showing some really good pace here today, and he's going to go around the outside in the wet of Pierre Gasly. What a move for the Spaniard there. Charles Leclerc is still sitting in P3, but he's spun the car. He has spun the car around. He's in the middle of the track. That's not good there. He very nearly reverses into the back of Fernando Alonso, but that is just a little bit too much power there. And I guess, it's not even that much power. I think just slightly too much. And, of course, being on a wet surface, he's just going to spin round. So that is very unfortunate for Leclerc. That could be something for the championship there, but he is still a decent way ahead of Russell at the moment. Norris gets overtaken by Sainz in that whole charade as well. He kind of got caught out with Leclerc spinning, and Leclerc's teammate, coincidentally, got the position. We are also having a little bit of trouble out the front of the race. Bit of sideways action, and then more sideways action as I try and get back on the power out of this corner. Thankfully, we've got a big enough lead here. It's over 10-15 seconds that we can carry on and haven't been caught right up to. The gap's now down to about 6 seconds, but yeah, just shows how big of a lead we had there, because that was a couple of pretty terrible moments there. Just the conditions changing, because now the dry tyres are now going to be the better tyre, and that's kind of what my issue was. The tyres were starting to overheat and also just generally wearing quite a lot. However, it's so late to the end of the race that I don't want to pit. Some other drivers have pit though. These aren't two of them though. Alonso and is that Verstappen? No, that is Perez. These guys still haven't pit off the intermediate tyres. Perez is going to pit though onto soft compound tyres. The first driver that we saw before to pit onto the dries was Valtteri Bottas in the Alfa Romeo. I mean, he's got nothing to lose, so maybe that can work out for him. And as cars, pretty much everybody actually on the final lap of the race decided to come into the pits, even Hamilton and all them behind me, they came in. I decided to stay out. Perez has actually jumped Hamilton because Hamilton just went into the pits so late. He might as well have just stayed out on the intermediates like we did. As you can see, they are rather worn, almost 70% on the rear there. But I did not see the point of coming in because, you know, what would be the point? We would have probably been jumped. I mean, I probably wouldn't have been jumped by Perez ourselves, but you can see how big of a lead we have. There wasn't any point to pit. We just had to make sure the tyres got to the end, and we're going to do that, and we're going to win our first race in F1 23. The Brazilian Grand Prix is ours. We win our first race. It is awesome. We had such good pace here. Great pace in the dry, even better pace in the wet. And it was, yeah, honestly, a bit of a boring race because of that, because we were just so far ahead, but it is our first win, so I'll take that.
And with that, another year of Formula One draws to a close, and a new World Drivers' Champion is declared. Another entry added to that prestigious list of the sport's most incredible drivers. So after a day of mixed fortunes up and down the field, we bring today's race to a close. What do you think it was today, Ant, that gave them the edge over the competition?
I feel like consistency was probably the key today. There's being quick, and then there's being quick lap after lap after lap. If you can do that, you can capitalise on other people's errors without making many of your own. And that's an approach that can push you a long way up the field.
Alright, so there we go. We don't get to see us on the podium because the bigger news is that Charles Leclerc is the Drivers' World Champion for F1 23 Season 1, for the 2023 season, we might as well say. Charles Leclerc has sealed the championship. I think he did finish behind Russell. We'll have a look in a second at the results. Yeah, so Leclerc P8, Russell P7, but that doesn't matter. Leclerc was far enough ahead that he has sealed the championship before we even finish the season. So that is awesome for Leclerc to finally actually get some luck in, you know, unlike real life, he's gone ahead and won the championship. It's P12 for doing, not the best. I was hoping for at least a couple of points considering we won the race. It's P7 in the championship for us. We may actually be able to beat Perez. We've only got like, what, 3 points behind Perez in the championship, so we may be able to beat him. Let's see how Las Vegas goes. And we've also re-overtaken Aston Martin for P4 in the championship, so that in the Constructors' Championship, so that is going down to the wire as well. Ferrari, though, have clinched the Constructors' Championship as well, so they are Drivers and Constructors' Champions both in this same race, so that is awesome for Leclerc, it's awesome for Ferrari, and I think Mercedes are fairly safe in second as well, with Red Bull third, but it is still a battle between us and Aston Martin for fourth. But anyway, that's going to be it for this video, guys. Thank you very much for watching. If you enjoyed, please go ahead, like and subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next video.